Hey everybody, how are you? So this is the video. We're going to talk about anxiety and depression with the man himself, Mr. Jeremy Bennett. I have known Jeremy now for a ton of years, as I mentioned that short video that we just did. But I first met Jeremy in about 2006 at St. FX. Lived across from each other at the dorm there. Became really good friends, really close over the years. I've helped him through so many scenarios of his anxiety, which we'll talk about in the video here in a few minutes. I think I was one of the external people outside your circle, Jeremy, that kind of opened up to about your issue there. So I really do appreciate that. And I want to ask you a couple of tough questions this afternoon, because I think some of the stuff that you know better than anybody, in my opinion, is the stuff that I dropped the ball on. So it's never easy to admit that you dropped the ball on anything, but I think you can pick that ball right back up. So let me ask you some tough questions. If you have any for me, let me know as we go through, okay?
I'm good to go.
Cool, man. So listen, I want to know right off the top. I got about 7 or 8 questions for you, and I think they're doozies because they're not questions that people ask commonly. So let me just throw them right at you, okay? So rapid fire. Tell me a little bit more about how our emotions are tied into our anxiety.
Well, you look at the Western world now. You look at Canada alone. I think the stats are 1 in 5 people are diagnosed with a mental illness. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and that's the people who report that they have a mental illness.
Right.
So what goes on behind closed doors is it's absolutely mind blowing. The stories I hear every day. I just finished a school tour a few months ago, and I did maybe about 50 schools, thousands and thousands and thousands of students. And one thing I'm seeing nowadays, the younger and younger people are suffering. Our generation didn't suffer like they're suffering now today. It's just absolutely unbelievable.
Agreed.
So if you look at your emotions, you look at your thoughts, we got to break down what stress and anxiety is before we get into the emotional contribution that it plays on how our bodies feel. So just to recap the 3 myths of anxiety, you look at myth number 1, anxiety is bad. Anxiety is not bad. Anxiety is actually a defense mechanism that sends your body a warning signal to say, listen up, you need to do something right now. I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable until you change. Anxiety is like physical pain. Nobody enjoys physical pain, but physical pain keeps you alive. It's a wake-up call to say, I'm going to make your broken bone hurt until you stop walking on it. Same as anxiety. It makes you feel bad because when you feel bad, you adjust. Myth number 2, situations cause anxiety. They don't cause anxiety. Your psychological reaction to the situation causes anxiety, which is kind of relevant to what you just asked. So if I'm confronted with a situation that I'm not comfortable with, let's say a person walked into the room, and let's say I love that person. My brain then triggers the release of endorphins, which you know all about, and you feel good. You know all about the runner's high when your brain is triggering the release of endorphins, like you can go forever as a painkiller, natural painkiller. Well, if you look at the opposite spectrum, if you're in an uncomfortable situation, your brain kind of goes into the fight or flight response and says, okay, I don't like this. We need to get out of this situation. This is something I'm not comfortable with. And your brain then triggers the release of cortisol through your adrenal gland and your kidneys, which gives you that fight or flight response. But what a lot of people don't understand, getting back to myth number 1, anxiety is bad. That's a myth. That is completely incorrect. It's nonsense. Anxiety keeps you alive, but there's 2 types of anxiety. Type number 1 occurs when you're in danger. In fact, that's about the only time you want anxiety to overcome your body, when you are in danger. The other type of anxiety overcomes you when you're safe. And that's what most people suffer with. You never want to get rid of anxiety when you're in danger. You're out in the woods camping, big black bear comes toward you. You want that fight or flight response. You don't want to remain calm.
That's why I don't go camping.
There you go. You want that adrenaline rush. You want that cortisol, throughout your entire bloodstream. You want that extra burst of energy to get out of the way. Either fight the bear or run away from it. It's the fight or flight response, which you know all about. So, but the other type of anxiety happens when you are safe. And that's the kind we want to get rid of. But it still happens for the right reasons. So myth number 1, anxiety is bad. It's not bad. Myth number 2, situations cause anxiety. They don't. They trigger negative thoughts that trigger the release of cortisol that causes anxiety. Myth number 3, you have to have a traumatic childhood in order to experience anxiety. You don't. It's not what happened in your past. It's constantly dwelling on what happened in your past and the dozens of little things that you do every single day that actually trigger the release of cortisol when you don't need it, when you don't want it to be released. That's what's causing anxiety when you're safe. So one of the biggest concepts that people have to really grasp when it comes to eliminating stress and anxiety, which you know all about. We had many conversations about this particular subject. The biggest thing we have to understand is this, and it's hard to swallow at first, but I specialize in the subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind, your mind does not know the difference between something real and a thought. It has no idea. Consciously, you know the difference. Subconsciously, you have no idea the difference between something real and a thought. And let me give you an example. I do this in every single one of my presentations. I give a couple of examples. And in my presentations, if I can't prove it to people within 30 seconds, I don't talk about it. So a lot of people, they'll find it hard to grasp that the mind doesn't know the difference between something real and just a thought. So I look at people and I say, well, who's scared of spiders? Some people may raise their hand. And I say, okay, what would happen if you thought about a spider in your hand? You know, there's no spider in your hand. But if you merely thought about holding onto a spider, your brain would interpret it as real. Consciously, you know it's not real. It's not there. Subconsciously, you believe it's there because you think about it, and you're going to start to sweat a little. You're probably your heartbeat is going to elevate. Blood pressure is going to go up. Your pulse is going to go up. You're probably going to get maybe clammy hands. And one of the best examples I can give to people who are skeptical, they believe that their brain always knows the difference between something real and a thought. I look at my audience, there could be 500-600 people there, and I say, okay, think about somebody you really, really care about. Think about maybe your child, or think about a loved one, somebody you really, really, really care about. So they're thinking about that person. They're thinking about all the positive emotions, all the memories they have with that person. Now I say, okay, good. Now think about that person that you love getting into a very severe car accident. And you can see them start to wiggle in their chair. You can see them start to sit up. And I say, what's going on? They can start to feel that anxiety in the pit of their stomach. That person who they love, who they care about, can be 2 feet in front of them, smiling at them, completely safe, making fun of them, completely safe. But yet they think about them getting into a car accident, their brain is going to trigger the release of cortisol from their adrenal glands, which is going to make them feel anxious because their brain does not know the difference between something real and a thought. And you think about this, we have on average about 60,000 thoughts every single day. 60,000. And researchers are telling us not only are most of these thoughts the same exact thoughts we had yesterday, most of these thoughts, for those who have chronic anxiety or depression, most of these thoughts are either dwelling on something bad in the past or fearing something that could happen tomorrow, which triggers all the emotions, all the chemical reactions that give you the fight or flight response when you don't need it.
It's amazing. It kind of leads into the next topic there about how we perceive our reality, you know, and it's one of those things I see people struggle with all the time because I'm putting people on, you know, dietary plans, supplementation protocols, you know, taking things out of their diet. And one of the key things that I do when I take away foods with people, they notice they actually start to calm down. And then they have that food 1 or 2 times and it kind of slips in and they come back and they feel like they're going to go to jail or something based on the fact that they had those 2 foods. So it's kind of interesting to see how our thoughts are woven into our perception of reality. And again, like, I can't relate to somebody that has anxiety. I don't present with anxiety. I mean, I've had situations that I've perceived, I guess, as being anxious, but I don't have it on a daily basis. So, I mean, I can't even put myself in these people's shoes about how they feel on a daily basis. But again, from the outside looking in, I can really see that it's all about how you're perceiving your reality and how you're actually manifesting what you're thinking about. So I know you're a big proponent for thinking about the things that you want to attract to you and pushing away the things that you don't like. So can you expand on some of those topics you talk about in your talks a little bit for me?
Absolutely. In my 2-hour presentation is kind of a general introduction to what anxiety is, what stress is, and how our emotions play a part in that, and how our thoughts play a part in that, and the top 5 things to the top 10 things, depending on the length of the presentation. If it's a 2-hour presentation, I talk about the top 10 things that contribute to anxiety, the top 10 things to eliminate it. I also do an 8-hour workshop, and I talk about neuroplasticity, which you know all about, which is actually reconfiguring the brain itself physically, right? Not this hocus pocus, think and hold out your hands and you're going to get what you want. You know, the law of attraction is real, but it has a very bad rep. A lot of people think the law of attraction is, think about whatever you want and hold out your hands, you're going to get it.
Yeah, there it is. There's your $1 million, right?
Exactly, that's nonsense.
Yeah. Foolish.
The law of attraction, you know, there is a real science to it, but I always tell people all the time, you know, if people say the law of attraction doesn't work, they simply don't understand what the law of attraction is. The law of attraction is not this fuzzy-duzzy thinking you shall receive. It basically, when we think about a thought over and over and over and over and over again, through a process known as neuroplasticity, you're actually rewiring the brain. So, to give you an example, let's say somebody was struggling with their weight. You stick them in a very busy street, let's say Chicago, downtown Chicago, and you take somebody struggling with their weight and take an Olympic athlete, and you say, I want you to go down the same exact street, come back, literally like holding hands so they're exposed to the same identical scenery, and I want you to come back 45 minutes later, and I want you to tell me what you remember seeing. I can guarantee you one thing. The Olympian, who's in really good shape, will come back and say, well, Jeremy, I remember seeing all the nutritional stores, all the fitness facilities, the people jogging on the street, things that they're interested in, things that they do, things that's relevant to their lives. Yeah. The person struggling with their weight, I can guarantee you, they'll come back saying, well, I can remember seeing the big giant yellow M. I can see all the fast food restaurants, because that's relevant to them. So whatever they think about most is basically wiring their brain to influence their eyes to pay attention and to notice particular things in their life. It's kind of like, I use this example in my presentations. What happens when you buy a new car? The second you buy a new car, you start to see that car everywhere. You start to notice it everywhere, right? Yeah. So, the thing is, you saw those cars the week before you bought yours, but why didn't you notice it? Why didn't it register to you? Because you didn't own one yourself. The second you own one yourself, your mind is totally consumed with that new vehicle, which is training your eyeballs to notice all the opportunities that reinforce that belief. But then, of course, through neuroplasticity, rewiring your brain and your neural connections to see the world differently, we just can't rewire them, see the world differently, and then expect to get what we want. We have to act upon it. We're not going to get in shape until, we go to somebody like you and alter our diets, alter our nutritional plan, start working out, start exercising. It's no good to rewire the brain and say, okay, let the weight fall off of me. You got to act upon it. Knowledge is useless unless you do something about it. True. So, the mind is so unbelievably powerful. We have on average 60,000 thoughts a day. You look at the subconscious mind. We have billions and billions and billions of neurons in the brain. And our brain can process an estimated 10 quadrillion operations every single second. Every single second.
Right? How do you figure that out?
The typical human being can't do 3 or 4 things at the same time. And the brain is doing, we have on average about 100 trillion cells, each and every cell doing an estimated 6 trillion operations every single second. And every single cell knows exactly what every other cell is doing and works in perfect harmony to keep us alive. Like, how can we even start to comprehend that type of sophistication? We can't. That's how powerful the brain is. So it all starts with our thoughts. It all starts in the brain.
So that kind of rings true, because I think one of the things that most people struggle with when they actually see me is the fact that I've taken away so many foods. So I've taken from them, number one, most of the foods that they're comfortable with. I put them in a situation where they're a little bit uncomfortable from the start. And people always ask me that common question, well, what the hell do you want me to eat? If I don't eat my breads and pastas and grains and my carbs and my fruit, well, dude, what do you want me to eat? And this is how limited our perception of reality is. Is that you're just all encompassing these 2 or 3 or 4 different food varieties that really aren't doing people any favors anyway. So it kind of rings true with the exact same thing you said, is people have the limitations you put on yourself are what drives your success and your failures, I think. And it's hard clinically to put that in people's heads until they hear it from a different perspective, where they start to experience a difference in how they actually feel when they take those foods away. Which is why I love the fact of, I see a ton of stumbling blocks with my clients. Where do you think the stumbling blocks are, whether it's emotional, personal, physical? Where are the stumbling blocks of these people that you see that are struggling with anxiety?
Well, that's a loaded question, but you get back to the basics.
I told you they were going to be hard.
I like them. I like the challenging questions. If you look at, the basis of what anxiety is, first and foremost, people need to be educated on what anxiety is. The biggest struggle people have nowadays, they believe anxiety is bad. They believe that they're cursed by, some kind of devilish entity saying, oh, I got the anxiety chemical in my brain, I'm always going to have it, this is just my life. That's not the way it is. People think they're born, with panic attacks, they're born with depression, and I mean, better than I do. I mean, it's most of the time, genetics play a part, there's no doubt about that. But
I did a video on that. People learned about that.
There you go. But most people, play the victim. They play the victim to their biology and say, well, mom had anxiety, my grandmother had anxiety, my great-grandmother. That doesn't mean you have to have anxiety. Now, if you're living the same exact lifestyle, you're probably going to suffer with the same exact thing. Your
genetics
mother and 100%.
Versus epigenetics.
100%. And epigenetics have shown us since like the 70s, I think, that it's not so much what's in your genes, it's your environment. It's what you're exposed to. It's what you're eating. It's the environmental pollutants. Is what you're thinking, the power of your subconscious mind, the power of your conscious mind, who you're hanging around. So the biggest struggle that people have to understand, well, it's kind of a two-part question, or two-part answer. The biggest struggle, first and foremost, that I see, people are completely uneducated when it comes to anxiety. They think it's bad, it's not bad, it's there to say, you got to wake up and you got to do something, you got to do something now. Or I'm going to make you cry yourself to sleep for the rest of your life until you get to the cause. You know better than I do, we live in North America, which only, for the most part, only addresses symptoms. They don't even look at the cause. Now, sometimes that's fantastic. There's and another big thing, a lot of people think there's only one modality of medicine. There's dozens. Dozens. What works for one person may not necessarily work for another person. Yeah. And, I'm all for alternative medicine. I'm all for Ayurvedic medicine. I'm all for Western medicine. It all has its place. It's when it comes to chronic illnesses, typically Western medicine only addresses the symptom. And sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes we can only address the symptom. And sometimes that's the right way to go down, the right road. And, a lot of people ask me, well, are you against antidepressants? I'm not. Sometimes that's necessary. Like, if I'm all for it if it's needed. If it's needed, I'm all for any kind of medication. But my problem is this. When somebody goes to a doctor and they say, well, I'm suffering with anxiety, I'm suffering with depression, and without even thinking about addressing the cause, the prescription pad comes out. I have zero respect for that. You have to address the cause. Now, sometimes, of course, addressing the symptom is, sometimes that's the right thing to do. Everybody's different. We all have our own unique fingerprint. Everybody suffers in a different way, and sometimes antidepressants is 100% the right way to go. I'm never going to, bash that and say never go on antidepressants. Sometimes that's the only option that we can consider, right?
Agreed.
So, but at the end of the day, we need to address the cause. We can't only address the symptom. It's kind of like, for instance, this would never happen, as you know, but imagine, let's say you broke your leg, or let's say somebody, off the street broke their leg, the bone hanging out of their skin, blood gushing out everywhere, and they
don't call me.
Yeah, exactly. Or my brother's an acupuncturist. Don't go to somebody like that.
No.
They're not going to help you. But let's say they went to an MD. And I have all the respect in the world for MDs and emergency rooms. They keep people alive. They saved my niece's life a couple of times. I have so much respect for Western medicine. It's unbelievable. But let's say somebody broke their leg, the bone's sticking out. They go to the emergency room and the doctor asks them, what are your symptoms? And they say, well, I'm in excruciating pain. So they give the person a shot of morphine, a painkiller. And then they ask the patient, well, how's your symptom? And then the patient says, my symptom has gone away. I feel great. And then the doctor says, okay, I'm going to give you morphine. Take it home. Every time you feel pain, I want you to take a shot of it. So they say, okay, that's fine. And then they look at the doctor and they say, well, are you going to put a cast around my broken bone? Are you going to stitch up the wound like I'm gushing out blood? And the doctor says, no. But every time you feel pain, take a shot of morphine. That would never happen. That would never happen in a million years. Of course the doctor is going to address the wound. Of course the doctor is going to put a cast around the broken bone, stitch up the wound. But in my industry, it happens every day. People go see somebody and then only symptoms are addressed. They don't look at causes. Not everybody, but most of the time they only look at symptoms. And that's what I have a real problem with. And sometimes only looking at symptoms is the right thing to do. Everybody's different. But at the end of the day, that's why my workshops and my presentations are so effective. And I hear this all the time. I hear people say after presentations, Jeremy, I've been seeing somebody for 12 years. I've been going to a therapist. I've been going to whoever for 12 years. And your 2-hour presentation has affected me more than 12 years of therapy. I hear that all the time. And, it's because I address the cause. I address the myths. I go right deep to the cause. And I say, listen, you're not a victim of your biology. You gotta get that out of your mind right now. You need to understand the cause. You need to understand what you're doing. And some of my presentation is uncomfortable because I tell it the way it is. I don't beat around the bush. I'm not there saying, think positive and you're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to feel fantastic. Thinking positive is absolutely useless if you're going to continue doing the things that cause anxiety. So I tell it the way it is. I don't beat around the bush, and that's what people need to hear. And that's why the presentations are so effective. And it all starts with the mind. And when people come up and ask me questions about, well, should I avoid certain foods? Should I take certain foods? What do? I say, here, markkibyuk.com, email this guy, call this guy. That's where you come in. That's why we make a good team. That's the stuff you know about. And, I don't even touch that stuff because I'm not trained in that stuff.
Right. And that's a good point because, at this point in the game, some of these things can have profound impacts on the body. And again, unless you're trained to kind of see some of those interactions and things that what I call light people up and what sometimes bring people back down, you really have to know what you're doing for that. Yeah. So I applaud you for being able to say that. But, your journey in particular is interesting to me because I basically watched you grow out of your situations that kind of kept you down. I actually watched you be the person that was where most of the people that I see are today. I watched you kind of deal with those tough situations. I've helped you through some situations, just being there as a friend, and again, not being able to relate. So look, I can applaud you for how far you've come. And I remember the day that you told me that, you were going to open up about your fact that you had anxiety for your whole life and tell your story and tell me about how hard that was, because I think some of these people that are listening to this are kind of dealing with that exact same thing. And I know that campaigns are doing well for ending the mental health stigma there, but I think there's still so much stigma around mental health that you can describe better than me, that you're weak or you're not as strong as the person that's sitting next to you, or just get over it. I'm sure you hear it every single day, right? So tell us a little bit more about that journey you had and how far you've come in your own struggle.
It certainly was a journey, and it still is a journey. Like I learn every day from talking to people at the presentations and the people who read my books and that kind of thing. I hear from these people every day, and it really touches me. I can remember 15 years ago, I can remember making promises to myself saying, I will never come out with my story. I will never.
I remember that.
Exactly. And I mean, we had these conversations well before I got into this industry, helping people who suffer with problems that I had, 15, 20 years ago. And I remember telling you, this is something I'll never, ever, ever share. And I kind of told you in confidence, and I never really had any intention to share it. One of the biggest struggles for me was coming out with my story. For those of you who don't know me, who are watching, I suffer with a very severe form of obsessive-compulsive disorder. And to make a very, very long story short, I've had depression. I was on medication, antidepressants. I was doing up to and I'm not exaggerating this, I was doing up to 4 to 6 hours a day, every day, of rituals.
It's unfathomable, right?
It was crippling. It was crippling. 1 month, when my stress and anxiety was the worst, I lost almost 40 pounds in about 4 weeks. And I was eating. It was the stress. Now, most of the time people gain weight when they're experiencing a lot of stress. I lost it. Everybody has their own unique fingerprint. Everybody reacts differently to different stimuli. But, it was tough. I was doing up to 4 to 6 hours a day of rituals, tapping things, walking back and forth over lines, repeating things. If I looked at somebody and I said, how are you doing? I'd say, how you doing? 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 How are you doing? How are you doing? Until my body felt right, until my mind felt right. Everything I did, I had to repeat. And, when you and I met, I was on the verge of, getting through all of that. I was on the last stages of breaking free, because when I went through OCD, I didn't have a clue what OCD was. Nobody really talked about that stuff. We didn't have the internet. We didn't, you couldn't Google symptoms. But nowadays, everybody knows what OCD is. Everybody's talking about it, which is fantastic. So breaking that stigma is something people are doing every single day by talking about it. And hopefully one of these days, mental illness is going to be treated like a broken arm. If you break your arm, you're not going to sit at home and hope it magically heals itself. Nobody's going to be that, naive. It's not going to magically heal itself and fuse itself back together. The same with mental illness. We need to reach out for help. And in all of my presentations, that's the first thing I suggest to people, especially young people and students. And I say, first of all, you're not alone. And if you're suffering with any kind of stress or anxiety or depression, talk to your school counselor, talk to a professional. It's therapeutic in and of itself just to get it off your chest. And like all those conversations you and I had back then, that was therapeutic. And I mean, you were a friend to listen to me, and I confided in you. And a lot of people, when they do that, and I hear these stories every single day, they start to confide in people. A good 80% of the time, the person who they're confiding in, they'll come back with a similar story and say, oh my God, I'm so relieved that somebody else is suffering with what I'm suffering with, or my daughter has it, my son. It's humongous. So one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, in terms of what I do today, was releasing my story. And I'm telling you, for anybody who's suffering, who's listening to this or watching this, you got to reach out for help. And I also like to say in the same breath, the first person that you go to, the first professional, is sometimes it's not the right person, but keep trying, keep searching. If I would have relied on the first professional I went to, I don't know if I'd still be here today, honestly.
Wow.
Because they told me there was no cure for OCD and I'd be on medication my entire life. And I was 17 years old when I heard that. And I didn't have a clue what anxiety was. I didn't study the brain at that time. And so, we need to reach out for help and keep researching and the first person that we reach out to, might not be the best fit. But that's like everything. The first pair of shoes you try on are probably not going to be the best fit. Keep searching.
That's right.
It's not black and white. It's these types of therapies are so subjective, but we need to keep searching. We need to keep and every time we search, we grow. Right? You're not going to grow unless you struggle. So coming out with my story was extremely hard, but it was one of the most beneficial things I've ever done in my entire life, because now I have that opportunity to help people going through something similar. And I tell you, it was a blessing in disguise that I went through what I went through. I don't regret one day of suffering.
Wow, that's pretty empowering for some of those people listening. That think there's no light at the end of the tunnel there. So, I'm going to give you some props for coming out and saying that. Because, I remember when we had that first chat in your room that night, it was kind of, my mind was blown thinking about the fact that this guy that I see every single day and I chat to and I laugh with and I play ball hockey and I, do all these stupid things you do when you're in university. We won't even go into those details. So we'll leave it at that. But that this guy's struggling this much every single day. And, it's kind of went back to my own space and just thought about that for a second and just can't even fathom how you dealt with that the way that you did. And I remember the very first public presentation talk you did about your story I went to. And I remember I left that talk and my armpits were soaked. I was so friggin' nervous for you because I remembered those lines of, I'm not going to release this story and be vulnerable, and I'm not going to put myself in that position to be mocked or to be looked down upon. I remember that chat, so great liberation there for you, and I'm super happy to see where you are right now. And I've seen some of the people that you have helped clinically, and it's just amazing to see how, like, literally that light switch behind you on that wall was just flicked up for some of these people when you just said, one or two or three lines. So all the props in the world for you for that there, buddy. So that's great. So those people that are listening right now, you can take action steps with me. I do things a lot differently than your classic person you're going to talk about. Yourself, there's a ton of food influences that go into anxiety. There's some tests that are really kind of good to see some neurotransmitter stuff. We can measure those hormones that you're talking about, but the thing I like the most about what you just said was all these things are useless without actions.
Yeah.
So if you had to tell your audience, just like I tell mine, what they do with their lifestyle and how to frame that for them, what would you say would be a 1 to 2 or 3 quick action steps that people can take right now to start feeling better immediately?
Well, we first need to understand we're not a victim of our biology. That's a complete myth when people think, well, my mother had a grandmother had a great-grandmother had if you're living the same lifestyle, yes, you're going to suffer the same symptoms. But we need to understand we're not a victim to our biology. We need to understand that anxiety is not bad and we need to do something about it. People think that is eventually going to go away. I tell people all the time. I tell it the way it is. Most likely, not only is it not going to go away, it's going to get worse if you don't do something about it. It will inevitably get worse if you continue doing the things that, trigger those chemicals to be released into the body. And so many people, we got to stop numbing. We need to stop numbing. Newfoundland. I do so many presentations in Newfoundland. Newfoundlanders, I'm from Newfoundland. Like I'm saying it because I'm from here.
I'm a Cape Bretoner. That's good.
But I mean, we consume, not I, because that's something that's strictly out of my diet. But we consume the most alcohol in the entire country. And I tell you one thing: there's a direct correlation between alcohol and stress and anxiety and depression. Because when people drink alcohol, if they're doing it to numb, you can't numb anxiety and expect it to go away. We just can't do it. The more we numb, the more it's going to persist. So we need to take action and do something about it. And I mean, people numb anxiety with food as well. And I'm certainly not judging everybody. We have different ways to cope, but we need to address the cause. And I tell you one thing, that's not easy. And that's why so many times when people ask me, well, Jeremy, after a presentation, they might come out for a bit of clarification. But when they ask me questions about food, when they ask me questions about things that, I'm not there. I don't try to pretend that I'm an expert in everything. That's the first thing I tell people. I'm like, I can really help you when it comes to psychology, when it comes to the brain, comes to the mind, comes to thoughts and emotions and how they interact and all the chemicals and hormones that are released into your body when you suffer with anxiety and stress. But when they ask me questions about food, when they ask me questions about supplements, that's when I say you need to seek Mark Kibyuk. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert in that stuff because I'm not. And, right. The advice I give them might be wrong advice, so I'd never do that. So that's why I say you need to take that step. Call up Mark Kibyuk, go to the clinic, send him an email, go to his website, and he can fill you in on the stuff that I'm really not familiar with and the stuff that he's extremely good at. So that's why you're so effective with your work, because you're not a doctor that only addresses symptoms. You get right down to the cause, and a lot of the time that's uncomfortable, and a lot of people don't want to hear it, but that's the only time people are going to succeed, is when they actually get to the cause, and that's why you're so effective. And I don't know how many times I've heard people come to my presentations and, talk to me one-on-one and say, what, I took your advice 6 months ago. I went down to see Dr. Mark Kibyuk, and, I don't suffer with ADHD anymore, or I don't suffer with depression anymore. And he has broken it down, right down to the nitty-gritty, showing me what I need to get rid of, what I need to do, what I need to supplement with, what foods I need to avoid, what foods I need to eat, what I need to do on a regular basis, all this stuff. And they say, I'm so thankful that I went to Dr. Mark Kibyuk, because he has kind of bridged that gap that the stuff that I don't talk about, you bridge the gap there, and you talk about the stuff that I don't specialize in. That's why, I always send people to you with those tough questions about food, about diet, about, all those other subjects. So,
that topic too about, that we keep framing this word around, doctor and being a presence, and, that really means to teach.
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, if we're not doing that for our clients and empowering them on a way that's letting them have a one step forward every single day, we're really not doing our job. So I think titles mean nothing, but the advice that we give from letting those people experience, from our perspective, the differences of their food and their supplementation and their stress levels. I mean, listen, I would be lying to you if I said that I work with anybody that deals with anything other than blood sugar dysregulations and inflammation, because that leads to everything that you do in clinical practice. So like I said, I love the fact that they take action there, and I'm sure a lot of people that are watching are going to be empowered to take some action from either yourself or me. But you have this great book, right? You have this great book that you've done a few years back now. So this is basically what we just talked about in print form. So basically, it talks a little about your story, talks about some of the things you recommend, talks about some of the strategies that you use. So where can somebody find this book?
They can get that book anywhere, and it basically any store that carries books, Kohl's, Chapters, Indigo, Amazon, all those stores. In the book, it's called The Solution: Learn How to Truly Beat Stress and Anxiety. And in that book, I talk about the 3 myths we just touched upon it. I talk about it in detail and in depth. And I also talk about the top 10 things that contribute to stress and anxiety and depression. We can't really talk about it here because it takes hours and hours. And I also talk about the top 10 things that will eliminate stress and anxiety. And once we start to implement these steps, baby steps, and I mean baby steps, and I tell people all the time, you're not going to come to my presentation, and I look at them and I say, please don't come to the presentation, go home tonight and try to implement absolutely everything that I talked about. That's just going to bring upon more stress.
Same thing in my practice.
Exactly. We all need to do this step by step by step. And once you start to implement these steps, they start to become easier. And once you start to implement these steps, you start to regain energy that you didn't have before, because you're not wasting that vital energy on, stress and anxiety. anxiety and cortisol
Right.
being released. Every time your heart beats faster, you're actually burning calories. You're burning physiological energy. That's why people feel so drained when they have so much anxiety and they wake up and they don't want to get out of bed anymore. That's what we call depression. You know, it's all intertwined. And once we start to realize that we have on average about 60,000 thoughts a day, and most of these thoughts are either dwelling on something bad in the past or fearing what could happen tomorrow, you know, it's an awakening. And sometimes it's a rude awakening, but it's awakening. And people need to realize that they're the captain. You know, they can do what they want with their bodies when they start to address the cause in the right way. So that's what the book is about, is showing people exactly where stress and anxiety come from, is showing them the top 10 things that cause it that most people are completely oblivious to, and the top 10 things that get rid of it. It's not easy, but I mean, anybody can do it. I did it. I didn't have any special training. The way I did it was trial and error. I didn't have a clue what I was doing until I started to study, you know, the things that that helped me in university. But if I would have known back then what I know now, that journey would have been a whole lot easier. But absolutely no regrets. I'm so thankful that I went through those 10 years of crippling pain, crippling OCD, depression, anxiety, because now I'm able to help people going through something similar. So I mean,
you can relate to exactly what they're saying verbatim. Whereas someone like myself, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, I can't. I don't have those. I have my own struggles, obviously, but I don't have the same struggles that you've had to help your audience there. So that's a good one there as well. But look, man, we got to wrap this up. I think we're getting along that time that we need to start wrapping this down. But tell me some final thoughts. Give me whatever you want to give me in the next 3 minutes here, and so people can take a good take-home message away with them.
Anxiety is not bad. That's a myth. It's a defense mechanism that your body sends you, basically telling you need to take action. There's two types of anxiety. When you're in danger, you're about to hit a car on the highway, you feel a billion pins and needles all over your body, you become super focused. You never want to get rid of that anxiety. It's the fight or flight response. Big alligator comes towards you, you either want to fight or to run away. And you get that extra burst of adrenaline because of the fight or flight response. So anxiety should only overcome you when you are in danger, but it overcomes you when you're safe because your brain doesn't know the difference. It cannot distinguish between something real and a thought. So whatever you think about, your body reacts to. Thoughts become things. You got to reach out for help. You know, you can't live in silence. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy to reach out for help. It's not like a broken arm. You know, there's a stigma attached to anxiety, stress, depression. So I'm not going to say it's easy. It's not easy. But I mean, reaching out for help will be inevitably one of the best things you can ever do, because you cannot live in silence. I tell this to all my students in schools. I tell it to all the adults that come to my presentations, everybody who reads my books. You know, you got to reach out for help. You cannot live in silence. And we need to address the cause. And I also like to tell people, you know, if you're on any kind of medication, people ask me all the time, Jeremy, should I take this? Should I come off of this? And I say, you know what? Yeah, you got to talk to your doctor. I always refer them to the doctor. You know, never quit without going through the discretion of your doctor or healthcare professional. Because, I mean, those are real chemicals. Your body adapts to it. You can do yourself a lot more harm than good. So any questions that come to me about medication, I say, that's not what I study. Talk to your doctor. Talk to a professional. Do it under his or her discretion, period. So, I mean, these things we need help with, right? So anybody who has a broken arm, they go get help. Anybody with anxiety, stress, depression, they go get help. And I would encourage anybody who who has any questions about the work I do, they can visit my Facebook, add me there, like my fan page, visit jeremybennett.ca. And if you have any kind of questions about the physiology of stress, anxiety, depression, the chemicals, the neurotransmitters, your diet, what you're exposing yourself to, what you eat, what you shouldn't eat, you know, visit Dr. Kibyuk. That's what he's there for. That's why I send so many people to you. And they come back to me, you know, a few weeks later, a few months later, and they're like, one of the best decisions I've ever made was to go see you. So, and I'm not saying that just because you're in front of me. I'm saying it because it's true. Right. You know, I would never endorse somebody unless I know they're really, really exceptional at their work. And that's why I tell it the way it is.
That's great, man. Listen, I very much appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Thanks for thanks for coming on board and having this chat with me. You can interview me whenever you want. Ask me some tough questions I just challenge you with. It's all good. But listen, thanks for coming on again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, bye. Take care.